Conflict and tension. That's right. Add depth to your world, creating conflict and tension. Conflict and tension within your world, especially the world building, can be more than the main antagonist or the main narrative. Just because there is conflict and tension in the world doesn't mean that it is the story or the narrative you're trying to tell. But the world itself can still have tension and conflict in it. There are different ways to add both direct and indirect conflict, or how these tensions can influence your characters and setting, and even why conflict is essential for a dramatic, dynamic, and engaging narrative. As a writer, your goal is to make your world feel more alive and full of potential. So the more you add to it and the more it influences the surroundings and settings of characters, the better it is. But Thomas, what is creating conflict and tension in a world? Well, when it comes to world building, it's not just about creating landscapes, cultures, and history. It's about conflict. Conflict and tension are what make your world feel dynamic and alive, where it feels like it has stakes in it or consequences. Things don't just happen and then vanish and then the world is fine. They're the forces that challenge your characters, drive your plot, and keep readers invested. By creating meaningful conflict within your world, you add layers of depth and make the setting feel more complex and realistic. But Thomas, how do I create conflict and tension? Well, we're going to talk about that. One of the things to create effective conflict in your world is start by thinking about the elements that naturally cause the friction. These could be cultural differences, political power struggles, limited resources, or historical rivalries. For example, if two neighboring regions have different religious beliefs or resources are needed from them, this can easily lead to ongoing tension. Maybe one region is experiencing a drought, leading them to encroach on their neighbor's territory, or perhaps a newly discovered resource is sparking a political feud over who has the right to control it. Conflicts like these can have a direct impact on your characters, driving their motivations and creating challenges they must navigate. As an example, in my epic fantasy novel, the first one for Death of a King, right, in the Maven War saga, uh, there's a king, and then there's no king, and that king had a kingdom, but once that king left, all the regions within that kingdom separated and became their own sort of like isolated things. But on top of that, there is an emperor now, and they control all of Nordragas, which is the continent. And every aspect of that creates conflict and tension. It isn't necessarily the narrative drive, but the worlds within those areas are affected and influenced by those dynamics. Additionally, there are the five spirit tribes, and there's a thing called the Battle of Five, and that has a history to it, and that influenced the relationships. So every aspect of every element of your world building should, in essence, have a direct influence to the way people live. But not just that, but like the currency, the politics, the resources, everything. So you got to think like that. Also, the big and small of it all. I apologize. I'm having lung issues. Every every freaking I have the restrictive lung disease. So sometimes I get and I feel tired. I feel like lightheaded. So if I'm like messing up my words, that's why. If I'm stumbling, it's because my brain is not working. But I got to push through it, right? You can't let sickness control you. So let's do this. The big and small of it all. Tension doesn't always have to be a large geopolitical scale. It can also be personal. The same cultural differences or regional issues can trickle down to individuals, affecting how characters relate to each other. Perhaps two characters from different backgrounds struggle to trust each other because of inherent prejudices. Or maybe a character is torn between loyalty to their family and a growing connection with someone from an opposing faction. Romeo and Juliet, anyone? By adding these elements of intrapersonal conflict, you give your world a lived in quality where the broader conflicts impact people's everyday lives. You might be saying, but Thomas, I don't really want to do prejudice or racism or any of those things. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have to. But there are different cultural beliefs as well. So even if you went religiously, but like it isn't that they hate each other, it's just, this religion, they kill goats, and this religion, they drink blood. Right? It happens. So when they have their customs and their way of life is going to be different. Um, or let's go a little crazier. One kills goats and they goats, and the other people they worship goats. So goats are divine and they don't kill goats. So they would have opposing views on that. They might not quote unquote hate the other people, but they'd be like, you shouldn't kill goats, they're divine. So it's little things like that that can just create behavior. Remember, a narrative is a plot and story, right? So the story is the behavior. It's how characters are reacting, how they're being affected by everything, and then they're creating their behaviors, their positions, how they experience things, the reasons they make choices. That's what the story is. It's how it unfolds through the character's emotional experiences and choices. Whereas the plot is like, Thomas meets Sarah. Like that has to happen no matter what. But how they meet is the story. All right. But you want to consider how history itself within your world has shaped present day tensions. Are there unresolved grudges or old wounds that continue to fester? We still talk about World War II and the horrificness of that experience. That's World War II. I mean, 44. Look how many years later it is, right? We don't. I mean, if we really think about it and studied, even Stalin, killing all his 6 million people, yeah, right? These things still have an effect in the sense of like we know about it, and it has changed the way we exist. It changed the politics of the world. World War II, I believe, created the UN. Like it was like we should get together and make sure this doesn't happen again. So consider that, consider how the history of your world, even though it isn't technically happening in the present of your narrative, you can still look back and say, well, how does the history leading up to here influence the world around the narrative I am telling? Okay. And the truth is, even those historical truths can lead to unresolved grudges or old wounds that continue to fester because maybe a once powerful empire collapsed, and now the smaller states that emerged from its ruins are competing for dominance. Or maybe these past events can create ongoing friction that informs how characters see the world and their place within it. There might be people that are like, wait, the empire fell, but I still believe in the empire, so I'm gonna the empire, right? And you get that kind of behavior. And then there are other people that are like, no, we're liberated. Like the empire doesn't exist anymore. And then you get the order of the first. Anyway, ultimately, conflict and tensions are essential for making your world feel truthful. Remember, truth, that's what you're always looking for when you're writing is truthfulness. Are they truthfully reacting? Is it truthfully cause and effect? Is it truthful emotional behavior? Is it truthful, historical, logical narrative, et cetera, et cetera? And this truthfulness, it prevents your setting from becoming static. Instead, giving it movement and unpredictability. By weaving conflict into the cultures, politics, and everyday lives of your world's inhabitants, you create a story environment that is rich, layered, and full of potential for growth and drama. Remember, conflict keeps a reader interested, and but conflict doesn't always have to be there's a war. But like watching people debate an idea or watching people, do we go here or here, becomes interesting, right? Will they, won't they is a conflict. All right. Enemies to lovers is a conflict. Will they, won't they succeed is a conflict. We have no money and we're going to lose the house is a conflict. and then seeing them break through all the little tiny micro conflicts to succeed at saving the house is right. That's we're interested in that. So anyway, indirect conflict. Not all conflict and tension in your world need to be directly tied to your protagonist or even the main narrative itself. Sometimes the broader elements of your world, like a regional war, controlling religious power, or the harsh climate, act as a backdrop that subtly influences the characters' lives and decisions without becoming the central focus of the narrative. This is what we call indirect conflict, and it adds richness to the setting, showing how larger events have indeed shaped everyday experiences. For example, if a war is happening in a nearby region, your protagonist may not be directly involved, but the consequences of that conflict might still affect them. They could struggle with shortages of essential goods, seeing an influx of refugees, or face new laws put in place because of the ongoing war. This typical, this type of indirect conflicts make the world feel alive and interconnected, reminding readers that the protagonist's story is part of a larger reality. Similarly, similarly, sim, similarly, sim, similar, similarly, it's called dyslexia. Similarly, similarly. Consider how a character's environment impacts their life, even if it's not the main story. Living on a desert planet like Dune shapes the daily routines, values, and survival skills of its inhabitants, their religious beliefs, and the way they look at water. Or if a character resides in a cold, remote region, the harsh weather might influence their demeanor, their physical capabilities, and even the community dynamics. These indirect tensions and challenges help paint a fuller picture of what life in your world is like, giving depth to both the setting and the characters. Now, by incorporating indirect conflict and tension, you ensure that your world isn't just a static backdrop, but it can actively influence the lives of your characters, even when it's not the main story. This adds an extra layer of realism, making the world feel more immersive and allows readers to sense the weight of the world beyond their immediate experiences. You want some examples? I'll give you 3 examples. Dune by Frank Herbert. In Dune, the desert planet of Arrakis plays a significant role in the lives of its inhabitants. The scarcity of water, the harsh environment, and the political control of the space melange all create indirect tension that shapes the protagonist's experiences. Paul Atreides is influenced by the ongoing power struggle and survival challenges of Arrakis, even when these larger conflicts aren't the central focus of the story. Hunger Games by Susan Collins. In Hunger Games, the broader conflict between the capital and the district serves as an indirect influence on Katniss Everdeen's life before she ever steps into the arena. The scarcity of resources, oppression, the oppressive government control, and the cultural differences between the districts and the capital create an atmosphere of tension that affects her decision and her perception of the world. Okay. And remember, I believe it's more champions, or the better you are, the more your district is rewarded. The Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. Rothfuss. In The Name of the Wind, all right. Kavoth's experience are shaped by the political and social tensions of the world, the ongoing war with the mysterious Chandrin, the different factions within the university, and the economic struggles he faces as a poor student all serve as an indirect conflict that influences his journey. These broader elements impact his choices and add complexity to his characters. Okay. Final thoughts. And we'll call it a day. Creating conflict and tension in your world is a process that takes time, and that's perfectly okay. But you should try to think outside the box and remember that not every conflict needs to be front and center to have an impact. By weaving both direct and indirect tensions into your world, you add layers that make it feel rich and lived in. The more time you invest in understanding the forces at play in your world, the more authentic and compelling it will become. Most importantly, have fun. World building is a creative endeavor, and I assure you, everything is made up. You have the freedom to change, adjust, and explore your world however you absolutely want. So embrace the journey and enjoy bringing your world to life. Next video in this series, we're going to tackle magic systems and supernatural. I'm pretty excited about that. Question: how do you currently incorporate conflict and tension into your world building? Do you focus more on direct conflicts involving your protagonist, or do you enjoy adding layers of indirect tension that influence the story in subtle ways? Let me know in the comments below, man. If you like what you saw today, but you just haven't done it, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. Other than that, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.